Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York, and today we welcome a special guest, Amalia Sirica, who will be talking all about how we can incorporate yoga and dance into our social work practice, including her own experiences. So thank you, Amalia, for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, before we get started, for those listening, don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're using, and we will dive in. So, Amalia, can you just introduce yourself to the listeners, including your background and what you're currently doing?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a clinical social worker and an RYT, which is registered yoga teacher. I've had my 200-hour training, and at the moment, I took a little social work break in
There
2022.
we go.
So we can talk more about that.
Mhm.
But I've been the last 9 months, I've been treating folks that are struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder. And that's the most niche, as
Mhm.
social workers, right? Like when people ask me what my niche is, I'm like, right? Because we kind of work, one of the beautiful things about the profession, I think, is that we work with, with everyone, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, so it's been really interesting to work with, I've never specialized before, I guess is what
Mhm.
I'm trying to say. So I've been doing that for 9 months, learned a lot. My background is more in cognitive behavioral therapy with like a focus on trauma.
Mhm.
This is exposure and response prevention.
Yeah.
So it's behavioral, which has been quite a change,
But,
but also really interesting, and
mhm.
just this idea, this continued feeling of, wow, there's just so much, there's so many incredible tools out there, and just having almost like a toolbox instead of just
Mhm.
like one or two, so that's, and then prior to that, my early days, I graduated from my master's. I graduated from NYU in 2014.
Mhm.
Um, and then from there, I worked with teenagers for
Oh,
6 years,
great.
mostly in crisis prevention.
Mhm.
And then after that, got my hours, got my clinical license, and then did more of the private practice thing for a while.
Exciting. You've covered a lot.
There's a lot. Yeah, it's been an eventful 10 years.
Yeah. What made you switch into like specializing in OCD?
It was just, I was like, I need to, I was like, I need to kind of re-enter the
Mm.
field. And, I sort of threw a bunch of things out there, and this was the one that came back. And I was
Oh,
like, well,
great.
I've never done anything like this before. So let's see how it
There we go. All
goes.
right. Now, I mean, today we're kind of diving into the aspect of using yoga and dance in
Right.
practice. Can you talk about like what first led you to that and your own experience there?
I mean, definitely. I mean, I honestly, the short answer is that it's been my own healing journey.
Yeah.
And the just this idea of, I've always kind of, without knowing it, without even having language for it, kind of sought out somatics.
Hmm.
So I remember, the first few times I took yoga, for example,
Yeah.
and just getting to the end of class and experiencing like what a still mind felt like, and being
Hmm.
like, maybe there's something,
Hmm.
and this idea of kind of, if if we can't if we can't think it out, right, we might
Hmm.
need to move it out, right? Like
Yeah.
this sort of, and so this is obviously what's great. It's great to see. I would say, I think there's still a bit of a gap to be bridged, but it's great to see the kind of more clinical, sort of mind based, right?
Hmm.
And then the somatics world's like starting to get closer together,
Yeah.
right? Because there's all of this, right? Body keeps the score, or,
Yes.
there's just, that's the one that there's so much more other than just that book, but that's
That's
kind of
the big
everyone.
one.
That's the one that everyone calls to mind, right? Even there's such a wealth of wisdom out there. But yeah, so that's kind of is, and then dance. I've always loved to dance. Um, my mom grew up in Portugal and Brazil, so our kitchen was always full of music, and dancing and it's just a joy. It's just such a joy practice for me. And then actually when I was living I lived abroad
Hmm.
last year, and I've always watched people partner dance and just thought like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, like this is just, but like I could never,
Right.
um so much coordination, so much like, and then finally I was like, you know what, like I this is something I've wanted to do my whole life. I'm
Hmm.
just gonna start, and it's just been such a gift because it's yeah, it's again just such a joyful
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that too, because I think for a lot of people that I work with, even within myself, we might see something like, oh, that seems interesting, but I could never. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't have that ability. But if we just like open ourselves up to that opportunity, it can just be so much.
And I think it goes back to also, it's like there's a lot of overlaps with perfectionism and the OCD, and like so I work
Hmm.
with it, right? And so it's like and definitely just this idea of like, I think someone sent me something once and it's like, I am very dismayed to have to accept that in order to eventually be good at something, I have to be bad at it first.
Awful.
Horrible, horrible, right? So just this idea of also, we keep ourselves like, yes, we're staying safe and we're not making any mistakes and we're not really
Mhm.
sort of looking silly or whatever kind of, language you want to put on that, but we're also not expanding and we're not trying new things and so
Mhm.
it's like that is like it's the risk of, not being perfect at something
Yeah.
kind of worth the experience of that joy or that, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that too with a lot of my clients, exactly what you were saying earlier, where maybe they don't have the language like mentally to talk through something or work
Exactly.
through something. And so, like, I found like a lot of movement or like different practices like that has been really healing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, it's like it's somewhat maybe even if you've ever worked with kids or you
Hmm.
watch young children, right? Like they're not,
No.
they're not always expressing in words, right? They're in noises and actions and
Hmm.
behaviors and like, and I think that there's this funny thing where we think, well, we're grown-ups now. So, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, all of us kind of have that child part still, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes that child part is the part that's like it just needs to be felt,
Yeah.
right? And I think that as we get older, we jump very quickly to intellectualizing.
Hmm.
We're like,
Absolutely.
I'm feeling this, this is why, right? As opposed to I'm feeling this.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's very true. Now, at what point did you start to incorporate like dance and yoga into your social work practice?
So I would say, like, I was thinking of reading your questions. I was like, I
Mhm.
actually, it's still talking about blocks and like,
Yeah.
right? It's not. It's been a slow process for me because
Hmm.
it really is like, it's. I mean, I wouldn't say it's that out of the box, but it's a little out of the box, right? And I think, and also, we have to take into consideration, right? Like we're offering something like, that. Um, that isn't going to resonate for everyone or that
Yeah.
isn't right. So it's just it's been, they're still a little separate is the short
Hmm.
answer, right? I
Sure.
think I like ideally will get to a place where they're more integrated.
Hmm.
um I bring them in when if I like sense openness in someone,
Yes.
right? And then I'll be like,
Hmm.
have you tried yoga or have you tried, right? But
Hmm.
I definitely, am not in the business of kind of like, telling people they have to do something or like,
Hmm.
right? It's more
Right.
kind of like a feeling I get. And if I feel like someone is open and if it would be helpful, like we'll talk about it.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's been my experience too, at least with yoga. I haven't really done much with the dance. But even just like with breathing techniques or something,
Totally.
even that, like you get some resistance for some people, like, I don't really know about that. And so it's just as much as we can internalize some, like have those barriers up towards it, like a lot of the
Yep.
people that we try to work with too.
And it's it's like what I always say is like, I mean, that was me, right?
Hmm.
It's not like I'm, on my high horse here, right? Like
Right.
my friend and she and I were both kind of like fitness people, right? High
Hmm.
intensity work, and we went, we were both like, all right, we'll try a yoga class. You know what I mean? Like, but it was not excitement. It was not, right. It was just this
Hmm.
kind of, there's also this, I think, I kind of wrote it in the bio I sent, but there's a bit of, again, I think it's getting like a little closer, but there's a bit of a science spirituality divide still,
Hmm.
right? And there's this idea of like, oh, that's kind of woo woo, and it's not
Yeah.
really like, and it's not, and again, because we get kind of um it's hard to explain it in words,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
So we're kind of like, well, what is it? Like, I want to understand what this, and it's like you don't always have to understand
Hmm.
anything.
Absolutely. Sometimes
Right?
things just work and are helpful.
Sometimes things just work and are helpful. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So yeah, so it's, I think it's that, it's also like, and again, to go back to the trauma survivor
Hmm.
lens, right? It's like, that safety is very important. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I don't know who's going to be there. What's the space going to be like, right? So like I
Hmm.
tell people all the time, like, so, there's especially in New York, there's amazing trauma informed yoga
Yeah.
places. There's a right. So it's also like you don't have to just throw yourself into a space that doesn't feel safe or comfortable, right? Like
Hmm.
you can seek out spaces that have that lens.
Yeah. Absolutely. What have you noticed just within your own journey too? What has been the impact of using yoga and dance?
I mean, I just am such like I am so cerebral, like
Hmm.
my brain is like it just never stops. It's
Hmm.
like I wake up and it's going, And
Yeah.
so I just I like I have to move, Like
Hmm.
it's like, and I know when I'm like thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, like I
Hmm.
have to go dance, I have to go to, right? Because it's like I've one of the major compulsion in OCD is rumination,
Yeah.
right? And this idea of kind of like, if you're just kind of turning the same thing over and over and over again in your mind, you're
Hmm.
not solving anything, right? You're
Right.
just, right? So this idea of kind of like, um, yeah, like I said, that the stillness of the mind and shavasana at the end of a yoga class,
Hmm.
or like after a couple of hours of dancing, and and what you find sometimes is that the answers were there.
Hmm.
It's just that there was just a lot of chatter,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So
That's
I
very
think the
true.
combination of those two things with talk therapy, or with like,
Hmm.
right, when then you can like, because then you move and then you can come in kind of clear, talk about, right? I think it's such a
Right.
powerful duo.
Yeah, absolutely. It really works together. You don't have to
It does.
choose.
Yes,
It's
that's my
great.
big thing, is like you don't have to choose, right? We're
Hmm.
constantly being asked like you have to be in this or this, right? Like in the, and it's kind of like, no, that's why I mentioned the toolbox.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, this kind of goes into the same vein, but do you notice any other benefits, whether it's people you've worked with or other things that you've noticed when people are using yoga and dance?
Um, I think yeah, other than, I mean, definitely, I mean, there's definitely physical benefits,
Yeah.
of course, like just I don't, I don't actually know the science, so I don't want to misspeak, but I think I've I think I've read, I mean, I've read like, I mean, for the heart, right? For the like,
Hmm.
it's just like, I mean, it's kind of what you hear about physical activity in
Yeah.
general. But and again, like when I'm in my scientific spaces, I have to be kind of careful, but there's spiritual benefits,
Hmm.
there's like, so a yoga class or meditation, or like, it's not that you're not getting all like a lot of benefits from physical activity in general, but it doesn't have
Hmm.
that spiritual component,
Yeah.
right? Which, and I think spirituality, and like, which kind of gets like religion and spirit, it's like
Hmm.
people, like when we're talking about our clients and what people like,
Yeah.
sometimes people's experiences with religion growing up were very
Hmm.
painful, right? Like it's like, so that can be a resistance point, is like sort of, which
Yeah.
is why, yeah, I just tell everyone, it's like also like, how not every therapist is meant to work with every client, like not
Yeah.
every yoga class, not every yoga studio, not every, right? Like, so
Hmm.
it's just really, but yeah, but that kind of like, and the community,
Hmm. Oh,
right?
that's huge.
So if you find a yoga studio that you really like, or a group of
Hmm.
a dance studio, right? It's also like, it's that piece too, that feeling of kind of belonging, and like similar interests and all
Yeah.
that good stuff too.
Absolutely. Because you're all there for the same reason too, like just to have that experience. So I think there's also, it helps not have that judgment or like offer that more comfortable space to actually do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've practiced yoga. I teach, so I can sequence a class. I can flow on my own, you know?
Hmm.
But when I physically go to a class, and it'll be days where I'm like, I don't feel like moving at all. Like
Hmm.
I don't, I feel so just like heavy and just like not motivated. And then I go to class and just like everyone else's energy sometimes kind of picks me up,
Yeah.
and carries me for, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, I just did that whole class, like even though I
Hmm.
didn't really want to be here. So I think it's that component also is it's just like it's almost like the fullness of the experience.
Hmm. Absolutely. Now, what does it actually look like to incorporate this? I know you're still kind of like
Yeah,
integrating
it's a very good
yoga and
question.
dance into practice.
Um, I mean, probably like even at small, like it's small ways, maybe it's like a little bit of you start with like a little meditation at the
Hmm.
beginning of session, right? Just to like ground in, right? Because people
Yeah.
come in. I mean, it's especially in New York, like
Hmm.
it's hard to stay embodied here, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like there's just so much external stimuli. And
Hmm.
if you have like a sensitive nervous system at all, which many of us do without even realizing, right? It's like you get home at the end of the day and you're just like, what even just
Oof.
happened, right?
Hmm.
So even just that, like those like 3 minutes at the beginning, just kind
Hmm.
of being like, hey, let's arrive, right? Like
Yeah.
every yoga class has that.
Hmm.
So if the sequence of a yoga class is, you come in, well, it depends on the yoga class, but the style that I usually teach is like it's like there's a kind of like a beginning, a middle, and an end,
Okay.
right? And the beginning is always like because people are coming in off the street. You don't
Hmm.
know what kind of day they've had, right? It's like so I think about that, and also like as clinicians, like I mean, whether or not we realize it, we're like, there's a lot that we're holding all
Hmm.
day, right? And so
Absolutely.
for us, right, to just be like, okay, like I've arrived at a new session, I'm here with a new
Hmm.
person, let me kind of, right? It's just
Yeah.
that, and again, it could be 2 minutes.
Hmm.
So that's one.
I think that's so important too, because so often, like just modeling these things to clients, like if we come into a session, we're like, I just need to take a few deep breaths, like something
Yeah,
like that can be so powerful to them to be like, oh, well, we can do that.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Right. This is allowed, like this is
Hmm.
welcomed, right? And then yeah, in terms of the movement, like it's funny because when I'm in non-clinic, like I have no problem kind of having people kind of telling people to kind of stand up and like shake or like jump
Yeah.
around a little bit or like I think it would be great in session too,
Hmm.
I do. Like because I think it's just sort of it's like, okay, we just talked about this like really heavy thing or like
Hmm.
let's shake it off,
Yeah.
and because I don't think I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think it needs to be super complex to be
Hmm.
powerful, right? Like I think there's like very kind of, you know, uh, powerful but simple somatic practices that I think you
Hmm.
could just integrate over the course of the session, and I think it would
Yeah.
probably really add.
Absolutely. I've had, I think, only one client that's been really receptive to movement and kind of like
Yeah,
shaking things out.
yeah.
And we were doing a lot of trauma work at the time.
Mhm.
And I mean, they just found it to be really, really powerful. And I think that one bit, we first had that internal barrier of like, oh, I don't know about
Yeah.
this. And we were able to work up to it. And it was so powerful because then they were able to just release a lot in the moment and kind of work through just a lot of like trauma responses that were coming up for
Mhm.
them. So it really is powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, I think part of it is I feel like I could use, I am big on kind of like being, knowing that we can provide something safely and
Hmm.
so I think I'm still working on the confidence and
Yeah.
the sort of and just making sure that the practices that I would incorporate would be of service, right?
Hmm.
Because obviously you go into like a yoga space or a dance space and like I mean, it's I have a dream where the whole world will be trauma informed, but
Hmm.
at the moment, right at the moment, so it's like, yeah, so it's like kind of like, okay, some of these practices that work when that's not the container, you
Hmm.
just have to be mindful about kind of how they would translate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also, I think, the benefit to clinicians practicing, what we're
Yeah,
teaching clients is
that's what
that
I'm
way
saying.
we get a better feel for, okay, what's being offered in the community? What can this look like? How will a client
Yeah.
feel showing up to this space?
Yeah, I would say that I'm kind of still in that phase of
Hmm.
development, for lack of a better, like it's kind
Yeah.
of like the exploration part.
Hmm. Absolutely. Do
So,
you have any particular like client experiences or anything where you would really recommend, oh yeah, like yoga or dance could be really helpful for this person?
I mean, I really do just feel for those of us who like, I always like, I mean, people won't be able to see this, but behind my head is like a wall of books, right?
Hmm.
And that's just I'm visiting my parents right now, and that's just one wall of the house. The house is
Oh,
basically a library, right?
yeah.
So it's like, and I don't know, you grow up and that's just your norm, right? You don't even
Hmm.
think about it. But that's just to say, like, I come from a long line of very deep thinkers,
Hmm.
which is beautiful, right? Like, I'm so grateful for that. But at the same time, right, it's like there's times and places, right? So I would
Hmm.
say for any of my fellow sort of like, you just kind of get locked in there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just, it's just, and again, often what I see is that we go intellectual and cerebral when the emotion is just
Hmm.
not comfortable, right? Like we're
Yeah.
just kind of like, it's too big, it's too hard, whatever it is, right? So we're like, I'm gonna like, and this is also on an extreme, like that would
Hmm.
look like dissociation,
Yeah.
right? So I think, but then again, if someone's, I wouldn't just like tell them to go. I wouldn't just tell them to just like drop into, something like
Hmm.
it would be, this would be the benefit of doing it in session, I
Right.
think, is like kind of like it's like the window of tolerance stuff,
Hmm.
right? It's just kind of like you'd be expanding someone's kind of nervous system
Yeah.
capacity for yeah, but that's what I would say is like when we get, for those of us who get kind of very stuck in thought
Hmm.
and struggle with feeling, because
Hmm.
I mean, I don't have a number for you of how many times I've cried in shavasana at the end of
Hmm.
yoga. I
Yeah.
haven't spoken a single word for an hour,
Hmm. That's powerful.
right?
Mhm.
So this idea of just like the things get stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've seen that with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, because I do a lot of CBT with my clients, and there are some where, I mean, we can reframe, we can get into the nitty
Yeah,
gritty of the thoughts all we
sure.
want. And sometimes it's not helpful, it
Yeah.
just kind of keeps us in that spiraling space. And we just need to
Yep.
just pause and take a step back and ground ourselves and work through what's actually going on in our body.
And I think for those of us who, I mean, going back to like, it's like maybe we were taught our emotions were too much, or like, right,
Hmm.
like anything, like, and it's kind of, I say all the time, I'm like, emotions just are,
Hmm.
and we judge them,
Yeah.
right? So it's like that, there's not a good, I mean, sometimes the behaviors could be
Hmm.
better. Right.
True.
Sometimes a behavior that comes from an emotion could sometimes be, but even there, I like I am try to be mindful of not being like that's a good behavior or a bad behavior,
Right. Hmm.
right? Because I think like I think also movement practices, dance, yoga, like for shame, right?
Hmm.
For kind of like maybe if, and again, like to be very clear, this is not like you would work up to this probably if someone
Right.
had, but this idea of like, maybe, you've, yeah, just that shame is just a very like heavy
Hmm.
right, and a lot of times it's because we've done something, or like, something has happened to us, or like, and so just this
Yeah.
idea of just kind of like, again, again, I can keep coming back to just like kind of like remembering what joy feels like in our
Hmm.
bodies, right? Whether that's, and whatever that is, like for someone else it could, for me it's dance, but like
Yeah,
it could be so many things.
absolutely. Do you find there's like inner child work a lot of the times with yoga and dance that's happening?
I think that we've forgotten how to play.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I I think that I think that I also think what gets in the way of that a lot is sometimes trauma, and right,
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of this like, again, it's like so much from like, it's just a lot of just like, I don't deserve, right?
Right.
Like, I don't deserve to feel good. I don't deserve to have fun. I don't deserve, which
Mm-hmm.
is shame,
Yeah.
right? So it's like play, and like, again, it like will feel, because of those things, like sometimes it'll feel uncomfortable, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like your brain is going like, no, 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 you can't. This is too fun, right? You can't,
Right.
it's just, and also I think it's just the idea of just, and this is not anybody's fault. This is just where we're at systemically. But I also tell people all the time, I'm like, doing like, I went I was in like kind of a heavy headspace, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to Michael's, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna like buy the things that, and because this idea too of just like, and then I just like painted. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't anything like, I mean, not, it wasn't a Picasso, right?
Right.
But it was like, I tell people all the time, like, if you give a child a piece of paper, their
Mm-hmm.
first thought is not, oh my God, I have to make the next great work of art,
Mm-hmm.
right? Their thought is, I'm gonna like scribble all over the floor, sometimes the wall, right? Like,
Yep.
it's like, so this idea of, again, I think circling back to what we said at the beginning is just like, we feel like everything has to have a purpose, everything, we have to be good at
Mm-hmm.
everything, and that takes the play out.
Yeah. Absolutely. So just having that like mindfulness too of just being like, okay, we can just be free with this. We don't
And
have
be free with
to
this.
be good, whatever that even means, and all of that.
But that's what I mean, is like, we're very quick to label things good or bad,
Right.
and it's
Hmm.
like, and ourselves good or bad. And like,
Yeah.
so I think it's like being like, sort of just like allowing yourself to, because I mean, I think maybe we feel like this, but I mean, realistically, like, none of us are going to be good at everything, right?
True.
So, and it keeps us, it really, I mean, I was, oh man, my first, like, I would say 6 months
Hmm.
dancing, right? It was just like, I was like, it was, I was like, oh my God, I'm stiff and I'm awkward. I'm bad at this.
Hmm.
Everyone else looks so happy. Like, it was just like
Hmm.
kind of this, and if I had like, but then you just kind of keep going, and you get better, and but that, or those early stages, we just are so hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
and like, and I think partner dancing in particular is can be really, because it's like that, it depends on who you're dancing with, but
Hmm.
sometimes you'll just have this moment where you're like, that was both of our inner children, like, you
Mm.
just are just, it's just like pure joy. And there's so many things like that. There's not, I don't know if we have this in New York, but there's this other thing called contact improv, where she's just
Oh,
like,
okay.
you just keep, it's kind of what it sounds like, you just
Hmm.
keep contact with the other person somewhere, like a
Hmm.
hand or like elbow, wrist, and then you just kind of like, it again, like, it's just, if you watch kids, these are things that they
Hmm.
kind of naturally do, but then
Yeah.
we get older, and there's this feeling of like, I don't want to look weird.
Hmm.
And
Right.
that thought holds us back so much from play, because
Hmm.
play can look kind of odd.
Very true. When
Right.
you're working with any clients that have had like maybe some of these misconceptions or like resistance to exploring some of these things come up, what's your typical reaction? How do you work with that?
I mean, I think the first thing is just patience, it's just
Hmm.
sort of like, just allowing people to be like, I'm always amazed if you just kind of hold the safe space, and just like, because I think, again, this is the thought is like, and we see this with children too, is like, if children are playing and being silly and emoting, and like, it's because they feel safe,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's the same thing with I I I basically just view everyone as adult and having an inner child.
Yeah.
Like, for me, it's like, it's like, I just feel, we just all, it's, I think this isn't like more, I haven't studied internal family systems, but from my
Hmm.
understanding, I think this is like, right, it's like we all have these parts,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, kind of like, what part is expressing today, and
Mhm.
like, what does that part need, right? And I think we label needs good or bad, right? Like, so
Hmm.
just kind of allowing people to, just having that patience. And then and then it's always amazing to me, like, because some at a certain point, like, I'll often have people be like, I'm going to take a pottery class, and like, I haven't told, because that's the thing. I don't want to tell people what their things
Oh,
are,
right.
right? I
Hmm.
want to help them figure out what their things are, right? It stands
Hmm.
for me, but that doesn't need to be what it is for everyone else, right? But it's
Right.
just the joy things,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. It's so
So
special too when you start to see a client progress in that way, or like to just dive into something that maybe they haven't before or in a while.
it's
And
beautiful.
it's life-changing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very like, yeah, because it's just, that they're like allowing that, which is like this is a big thing with OCD
Hmm.
work, is like, okay, that thing that we're worried about is scary, right?
Yeah.
But is the, like, potential risk of it happening, right? And all of the, and like avoiding it, and like, right, is
Hmm.
that worth the cost
Hmm.
of not living maybe the fullest life, or like
Yeah.
something, and I think a lot of healing journeys hit that, right, where
Hmm.
it's kind of like, I've I mean, I talk to people a lot about, like, thanking the versions of themselves that got them
Hmm.
here, right? Because we have a tendency to kind of look, again, shame, shame, shame,
Yeah.
shame, shame, right?
Hmm.
Because we kind of come out of the survival mode. We look back and we're like, oh gosh, like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? etc. And it's like, well, because you were trying to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
And here you are alive, right?
Hmm.
And so that version of you got you here, like, um, and now, like, we want to make changes, but we
Hmm.
don't need to. We can do that without shaming and blaming, like,
Right.
that version of ourselves.
Absolutely. That's
So
so huge. Now,
mhm.
I mean, for other social workers that are wanting to just like take a first step and kind of incorporating this, what would you recommend? What would that look like?
I mean, I know it sounds like, but I would really tell them to do it
Hmm.
themselves. Like,
Absolutely.
it's like, I mean, I think that, like, all of my experiences of going to therapy myself,
Hmm.
like, all of it is like, because it's just, you're not, you've been on both sides, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I would tell people, like, if there's a movement practice that is, and, like, again, like, it could be rock climbing, it
Hmm.
could be like that fun yoga where you do the silks that hang from the
Oh,
ceiling, like,
yes.
it could be, it's just like,
Hmm.
everyone's going to have something that kind of different that calls to them, but whatever it is, like, yeah, go do it,
Hmm.
because then you'll understand also, like, that because it's not, the thing is that it's not an intellectual thing,
Yeah.
it's a body experience, right?
Mhm.
So it's almost like you have to do it,
Yeah,
so yeah,
absolutely. Because
I
that
would say.
also helps, I think, just understand where clients are coming from. Like there have been times when maybe I recommended like something like journaling. And I mean, I'm
Right.
a big journaler, but
Sure.
if clients like don't get it or they never really like they tried and they kind of had some barriers, like now I'm able to better understand where they're coming from versus just being
Yeah.
in this place of like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't get it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then I think also it's like, yeah, and it's just and then that way, like, if you want to, like, do some of the practices in session with them, like, you've
Mhm.
already kind of gotten a comfort level with them, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I would say. And then, of course, there's so many good trainings, and, like, right,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that. Also, there's a lot of people doing really incredible work around this intersection, which is really cool to
Mhm.
see.
Absolutely. What made you get your RIT?
I took the same friend who we took that yoga class together for the first
Hmm.
time. Um, she was gonna do the yoga teacher training at one of our local studios. I was actually, I think, I want to say I either was in, I think I was right after my master's program.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I took a class with one of the teachers, and it was just such a good class, and
Hmm.
I really like. I just wanted to learn from her. Like I just
Yeah.
had this like I think this person has things to teach me,
Hmm.
and I like literally signed up right after the class.
There we go.
uh and then again, like I have always been interested, I think, in um spiritual teachings and spiritual
Hmm.
practices, and just kind of this idea of like, okay, we like live in this, we live in the material world, but there's just some things that we can't quite explain, right?
Hmm.
That has always really intrigued me.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that because
So
it also shows there's such a spectrum of possibilities for like the social
absolutely.
workers listening. Like you
I
can
think
just
so.
ease in, or you can go all the way and get your RIT.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, there's all kinds of like there's so many there's just I do think some of the things I see happening within our profession are just really amazing. Like it's just
Hmm.
kind of like, and I would say too, like, that we, yes, like absolutely, like at the core, we have to stay in alignment with our values and like the values of the
Hmm.
profession and ethics and all that really important stuff. But like we are like a really creative bunch,
Yeah.
So I would say also like don't be scared to like bring in what
Hmm.
your kind of outside influences, for lack of a better way to put it, or
Hmm.
things that are unique to you. Like I've seen people just doing some really this is one, I think, one thing I am grateful for with social media and Instagram, right?
Hmm.
It's just like, oh wow, like that's such a cool way to do therapy.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Things that we didn't like, we just allow ourselves to lean into.
That's it.
Hmm.
That's it. Which again, like I think because the somatics are also like, oh, okay, like this feels scary and uncomfortable because it's like a little bit out of the box. Like I can kind of
Hmm.
like feel that in my body, right? And it's like us getting aware of that,
Yeah.
right? So that when our clients are feeling like, oh, this is like new, right? It's like
Hmm.
we're at least we like it's like we know what that feeling feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is huge because clients can also see that. Like they can feel
Yeah.
all of that, whether we're like talking completely nonsense or whether we really relate to them. Like they can pick
Right.
up on all of that. Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, so that's what I would say. And like, and yeah, just I think just that opening, like, yes,
Mhm.
kind of what benefits I've seen with yoga. Like for me, yoga, dance, like, it like it just like it feels like there's more possibility. Like it just feels
Mhm.
like it's like offers some brain expansion.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been so helpful, Amalia. I really appreciate you coming on. I feel like I'm gonna go
My
sign up
pleasure.
for a yoga class now.
Yay.
Wonderful.
But it's also like and like my surprise, I actually haven't talked about it as well. It's because it was one of my other favorite topics, but
Mhm.
I cannot stress enough how important it. I know, and again, like we hear this all the time. We hear it all through our master's programs. We take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of yourself.
Mhm.
But like take care of yourself
Yes.
because and things like, because again, like we are not, therapy works because
Mhm.
we're human too,
Yes.
right? Which
Mhm.
means that we're not this like, we're there also,
Mhm.
right? Like our bodies are also there in that space with our clients, right?
Yeah.
Which means that they need care,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
And
Because we're
so yeah,
holding everything from that space.
we're holding it, and so and like what I've just experienced over time is like the talking helps, supervision helps, but some of that stuff is just getting stuck in my physical form and I need
Yeah,
to move it through.
absolutely.
So
That's so important. Oh, how exciting. Well, I love this. For those listening, can they follow you, like continue to follow your journey somewhere?
yeah, so I'll probably, it's like I have my personal Instagram right now, and well, I'm it's like it's always like we're it's like we're telling everyone else to like follow their dreams, and we're like, I'm scared.
Of
But for
course.
now, they could follow me on, it's just my name, just all one
Oh,
word, on
perfect.
Instagram. Yeah, and then eventually there will be probably more of a business Instagram, but it's moving. And we're taking our time.
That's right. There we go. Well, good. And for those listening, that'll be linked below so you can go follow Amalia. And if anything resonated with you today, please feel free to like, comment, and share. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Amalia.
Thank you so much, Laura.